Hey everybody, welcome into the March edition of the Caregiver Conversation series by Carallel. Matt Perrin back with you as usual. It's the lunchtime hour here on the East Coast where I am, and that means we're gonna talk some caregiving. And today we're talking about emergency plans. Was not a strong point of mine in my caregiving, but we're talking about them today. And we are lucky to have Sheila Schultz back with us. Hey, Sheila.
Hey, Matt, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Very well, thanks. Glad to be here today.
Good, good. Well, glad to have you. And you better be careful. This is 2 months in a row that you've joined me, so you're going to be a regular guest if you're not careful.
I'm ready. It's all
right.
good.
All right, good, good, good. So we'll jump in, and a little bit of housekeeping per usual. First time here, if that's the case for you, welcome. We're Carallel. We're a caregiver support company. We help family caregivers help their loved ones in two primary ways. First and foremost, with personalized, dedicated support over the phone, email, or chat by Sheila, one of our care advocates, and our entire team of care advocates. And we complement that one-on-one support with My Care Desk by Carallel, which is our digital experience. Think of it as a one-stop shop online encyclopedia for all things caregiving. So, and we make the service available through health plans and employers around the country. And if you're not sure whether or not you have access to the service, ask your health plan or ask your employer. Second most important piece of housekeeping, though, these are conversations. You're probably sick of hearing me say this, but they're conversations by design. We really mean it. If you have perspectives to share, questions to ask, please do let us know. You have the chat option down at the bottom of the screen. Also the QA option. I am a one-man production show on these episodes, so I'll do my best to keep an eye on all that and address questions live, address your comments live, and anything we don't get to, I will make it a point to do that after this session. So how's that sound, Sheila? All good?
Sounds good to me.
Awesome, awesome. So let's a couple of things. Like, we try and be real practical on these sessions. So what does that mean today? And really means, for my money, sort of stepping back and understanding the importance of having an emergency plan when we're caring for a loved one, understanding the types of things that should be in the plan, and maybe more important than anything else, how to create one, right? So that's our focus, Sheila. And I guess to get us started, I have a confession to make. And I remember, I became a caregiver sort of gradually. My mom was living with dementia. It came on gradually. So I vividly remember at one point, her primary care physician was pretty stern, great doctor, was great for my mom, but pretty stern. And I at times felt like she was lecturing me. And one of the first lectures I remember is about the fact that I didn't have an emergency plan in place, right? I didn't have certain things in place. My mom was still living on her own at the time because it was still safe for her to do so. But the doctor was, I don't think she was meaning to admonish me, but I felt admonished, and it stuck with me. So, and it just felt overwhelming to create one, right? So, like, I guess, what is it? Is it like a binder? Is it a notebook? Is it, a bunch of stuff stapled together, stuck in the fridge? Like, what do we mean when we say emergency plan?
Well, I think it's different things to different people, but I do think that, first of all, your overwhelm is really common. It's from what I hear a lot. And I think the biggest challenge that people have is when they think of an emergency plan, it seems to them like it has to be some big extravagant thing, and they have to sit down and figure it all out at once. And really it is a way to make life easier in the case of any kind of emergency. And, we typically focus on healthcare conditions. We talk a lot about dementia, but this could apply to any emergency situation for your loved one. So it's how can we create something that makes it easy for you or whoever else is there to handle a tough situation, a scary, stressful situation.
Got it. Yeah. So healthcare, it could be a healthcare situation, like you said. It could be again, in my case, is dementia caregiver or behavior situation that was stressful or scary that I couldn't level out. We could also extend it, right, to like environmental stuff. People live in, say, Florida or a hurricane zone or a tornado area or wildfire
Mhm.
area. Like, there could be sort of action plans related to what needs to happen in those even more macro level situations. Is that
You bet.
okay?
Yeah,
Uh,
no doubt.
so basically, in like, I guess where do you start when you're creating it, right?
Right.
It seems so big to me, and this is kind of where my overwhelm that I was describing way back when came from. It's like, well, okay, on the one hand, it's an emergency plan, it's 2 words, like how big can it be? But on the other, like when you're in the midst of a situation where you're caring for someone else, it seems so big. Like
Yeah,
what what goes in it?
right. You know what, Matt, I think a really great analogy is when you think of an author who's going to sit down and write a book. They don't they don't have it all figured out. So, I mean, that's what I was trying to get to. This doesn't all have to happen all at once. To me, it is something that is slowly put together. Over time, you're taking notice of things, you're jotting things down in one place. It's about slowing down and sort of noticing, well, first of all, what kinds of things you're worried about. Like, let's
Mhm.
identify the things that you're concerned about. Is it a hurricane, or is it about dementia wandering, or is it about balance and a fall that might end up in an ER kind of a situation? So it's like sitting back and don't panic about getting this thing done. Just start almost journaling in one place, though. Jot things down in one place. What's going on? What am I really concerned about? And what if, like, what would I want to have happen? Don't worry about coming up with all the answers at this time. It's just about jotting down ideas.
Got it. And I hopefully you can still hear me. I think speaking of hurricanes, we have some pretty heavy wind here in New Hampshire today. So if I think that's probably my internet. Apologies for that, but we will forge on. Um, and my main takeaway in what you're saying there, Sheila, which I would have loved to have heard back when I was in that doctor's office, was it doesn't have to happen all at once. And to hear you
Right.
describe it that way, sort of it makes it feel what's the word I'm looking for, more achievable, right?
Mhm.
And starting um I guess from starting from the things that you're worried about, which that for me that might have been like a really long list. Or like, the things that could go wrong, or however you phrase it. I think the point
Mhm.
is clear. But starting from there and sort of working backwards, am I understanding you correctly on that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
It's just that's helpful for me. Um,
Yeah, don't focus so much on the end product as much as what are the general things that are making you want to sit down and do an emergency plan. And typically it falls into categories. Like if it's a dementia, it could be the behaviors that have happened before that you didn't know how to handle, or
mhm.
they started wandering, or it could be they've had a fall and you're trying to make things more safe. So there's always
Yeah.
something that's making you want to create that plan.
Yeah, that makes sense. And the other thing that really resonates with me that you said is it's whatever you want it to be, right? There are
Yeah.
some things that are probably best practice to have in it, but in terms of like what the tangible thing is,
Mhm.
and for example, um, if you've been on one of these sessions before, you know that I was also a member of my father-in-law's care team. He was living with Lewy body dementia in our home, but my wife, Lindsay, we sort of evolved into having this binder that sat on our kitchen table, and it was Steve, my
Yeah.
father-in-law's binder, and it was that one place for us. So
Yeah.
it
Important.
yeah, and it had all the stuff that I think we're going to talk about when we get into how to create how actually to create it, the stuff to be thinking about. But it was just there. It was this big giant binder that wouldn't have fit into one of my kids' backpacks. It was, and the good thing was it didn't go anywhere, right? Unless we were traveling with him. But, and there was some comfort that came from having that binder,
Yeah.
as big and ugly a table setting as it was for our kitchen table. It brought some comfort. So.
Yeah, and I think to your point, Matt, that the reason you want to have this, people, because I know you were sort of, you weren't, your doctor was not very happy with you, or your mother's doctor was not very happy
Yeah.
with you for not having one. But I think, and a lot of people might have been in your situation, like, well, it's too much, I don't have the time, or I don't want to do it. But in times of stress, you need instruction. You need a way to handle things because we don't think clearly.
Yeah.
I moved my mother into a little apartment, and a few months into that, her laundry dryer caught on fire, and she ran around the house looking for car keys to get her car out of the garage because it was close to the laundry room. Like, she just wasn't thinking clearly.
Right.
So, which could have been a really dangerous situation, but we all do things like that under stress. So it's so important just to have just the basics, like, what do I do first?
Yeah, I love that, because, and I just want to underscore, um, I think the words you use were, we need instruction, right, in those times. And I think that's so right. But it's not because it's because of the stressful situation. It's because of the situation that we're in. It's not because of the fact that we don't know how to,
Oh,
pick up the
no.
phone and call someone, right? That,
Right.
call a plumber if the, showers leak, or whatever. It's about the situation. And I say that just because I think when I look back to my own personal experience, there was, I don't know if it was guilt or just this feeling of like, oh, I got this, like I can do that, or some hybrid of these strange caregiving emotions that sort of was also present there. It seemed overwhelming to create an emergency plan, but it also was like, well, I know how to do that.
Right.
I was almost like offended, right? Like,
I hear you, Matt. And that's the issue, though. It's like, we don't realize what happens to your brain when you're under stress. Our bodies are designed to do things, not think.
yeah,
So, I mean, it's the way we're designed. And as smart as you can be, stress will logic goes out the door. It just goes out the door.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I love that. And okay, so maybe that's a good segue to talk about some of the things that we should do to create to sort of start the process, but also some things that maybe should go in to the plan, right? So before we jump into that, though, just reminder, Sheila and I could talk about this forever, for hours. You feel free, questions, perspectives, anything to share, please do in the chat or the QA window down in the bottom of your console. Okay, so Sheila, what would be the first thing you do? We've sort of established, right? Like, this is just a central location to keep important stuff, to give us instruction or to guide us in those moments of stress, right? And those
Right.
moments could be the result of, a health issue, a health emergency. It could be just a episode of behaviors that are really tough to manage, or something else, right? But what goes in what are those things that we should be thinking about? Like, what's the first thing you do?
Well,
Or
like I
think
said,
about?
the first thing I'd think about is identifying what is likely to be causing me a problem. Is it going to be wandering? Is it going to be a balance issue? Is it going to be behavior based on past experience, or
Right, I
based on
see.
what your doctors say might be coming
Mhm.
with your loved one's health, and what to look for? So pick just 2 or 3. Don't get overwhelmed with it. Let's just say, a couple of them. And then think back, sit down, like, make this an easy process. You're going to spend 10 minutes a day to sit down and think back. What was the last behavior that was tough? And what happened? And where were we? And what time of day was it? And
I see.
what medications were they on? So you're kind of creating this okay, and you might be able to connect some dots. I wonder if that was because it was, it was late in the evening and they tend to have problems that time of day.
Mhm.
So it's really more of a relaxing situation to think about putting this plan together. If you could sit down and just think back, think
Yeah.
back.
So kind of a review of what's happened in the past, but also trying to get at, you didn't use this word, but I'm like, what I'm hearing when you're talking there is the triggers for those situations.
Absolutely.
Um, and yeah, that I can imagine how that would be helpful. And it wouldn't be all inclusive, right? Like you're not, like
No,
you said, 10 minutes a day, and you're not going to or reconstruct every situation that's been tough that's happened, and then be able to sort of say, have this aha moment, like I bet it was that. But like it's about getting ideas, possibilities, right, on paper. Is that a fair way to think about it?
for sure, for
Yeah.
sure. And the more you think about it, the more memories will pop up. Oh yeah, it was this day, it was this time of year, this did happen this way. Um, and I think that the other thing that I think is important at this point is to tell people you're thinking about this. When
Mhm.
someone's writing a book, they're out in the world and they're getting inspiration from what's happening that day or from ideas from other people. So if your loved one has therapists coming in, tell them, I'm creating a plan. Do you have any ideas of what I could add to it? Or when you're
Mhm.
with them at their doctor's office, what can I add to my plan that you would know about this important?
Mhm. Yeah. Uh, that makes perfect sense. And I especially love that one because it sort of ties to a common theme that we talk about in a lot of these sessions, which is ask, right? And we often talk about asking in the context of asking for help, but it also applies to just ask. If you have an opportunity to be around someone, a professional, therapist, physician, what have you, nurse, whatever, whoever it is, like ask the question. It can't hurt. The worst they
Right,
could say is, not, no, I don't really have anything to add.
right.
When chances are they're going to have something to add.
You
So I
bet.
love that piece. And I love that one so much because that sort of ask muscle is really, it's a hugely important muscle for us to be sort of, um,
Flexing.
doing what we can to be strengthening and flexing, show it off. Right.
Mhm.
So, okay, we got a uh, uh, couple questions here, Sheila. Let me just.
Sure.
Okay. When my mom became my roommate, I started with establishing POA. Subsequently, I coordinated appointments with all the providers to reevaluate her needs so a plan could be created. Love that. Um, so that's, I mean, what just an awesomely proactive move. Um,
Yeah, I love that. And that's such an important part that a lot of people forget is establishing that power of attorney and on both
uh,
sides, the health and the financial. It's so important and a big part of the plan. It really is just to have everything organized. That's one other thing that you don't want to have to wait to the last minute to do.
yeah,
Because yeah, in a healthcare crisis, you don't want to be saying, oh my gosh, I forgot to do the paperwork. I wish I
yeah.
had.
I love it. I love it. And then another one here, which is another, a heavy one. Um, Someone's asking about creating an emergency plan, but really for the purpose of something happening to them, right? And them not being there to
Yes,
care for their person. Um,
I love that.
which is just uh, sort of an evolution of the plan we're talking about here, I guess, the way I see it. Um, but hugely important, and something I personally thought a ton about in the situation with my mom, just because I'm an only child, and small family and all of that. So thank you
Yeah.
both for those questions. um, so what about actions to take in the plan, Sheila? So I'd imagine stuff like emergency phone numbers for, first responders, doctors, um,
Yep.
that sort of stuff,
I
right?
think it's important important thing to have a up-to-date list of medications.
Okay.
I don't know if I cut out on you. Did I cut out a little bit? That was a
A
little
little
fuzzy.
bit, but up-to-date list of medications. Yep, I heard you.
Yep, yep. I think it's important at this point to gather people around you, neighbors, close friends, family members who might be a part of your team, your crisis team, and say, you know, would you be able to help in this situation? My mom tends to wander. This is what we'd like to do. Would you, you know, agree to be a part of that if we need to go look for her, or if I need some help here, someone to stay at the house while I'm out looking, those kinds of things. Important to gather people.
And what about, so you just sparked a thought. I'd imagine like, so having numbers of, you know, first responders to call, friends to call, you know, people on the team, but then also like when to call, right? Like should guidance about that be in the plan, I would imagine?
Yeah, yeah. And that goes back to, I think, you know, you had a big binder. And I love the idea of a big binder so you could grab it and go if you need to. I also think sometimes it's nice to have, once it's all done and once you have it figured out, to have just a cheat sheet that you can just put on the refrigerator or something. And it's like wandering what to do first, you know, who to call first. So it's that first action, and then you can get the rest of the information from the binder.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I'm just seeing some other stuff come in here. So one of the things that I wanted to mention too, like speaking of action, in dementia context, but we're talking about emergency plans beyond in really any sort of caregiving context. But something that I actually did, yay me, was create a little bit a safe space for my mom. And it's fresh in my mind right now because we just went through daylight savings. That was always a really hard time for us. That came in very handy. I guess is an understatement, but the way I'll put it. But even sort of stuff like that, right? In the event that something could happen when, you know, the primary caregiver isn't there, and maybe a family member or friend or outside caregiver is there, they'll know what to do, right? So again, thinking on that thread of action. What are your thoughts on that?
I love that. I love that. And that whole safety is such a big issue, especially when it comes to dementia. So it's a safe place. It could also be, if you're talking about managing behaviors, it could be a safe or distracting event like music or soothing, anything that soothes. So it could be just a safe place, meaning a place or meaning a circumstance. So, or food or anything that's comforting or soothing or safe.
I love it. I love it. I've seen a comment here that's another great one that is sort of part of this whole process, but you know, someone made a comment about keeping the paperwork safe, right? So which is so true. You know, the stuff earlier commenter mentioned POA and things like healthcare proxy and advanced directives and all that advanced care planning sort of documentation. Absolutely. Having multiple copies, keeping it in safe places, I would say. But the same, and you touched on this, Sheila, with whatever the plan is, if it's a binder, if it's a manila folder, if it whatever it is, like having it in a place in a place where everyone knows where it is. I can't reiterate that one enough. It seems super basic, and it is, but again, it can be you know, when you're in the midst of this sort of experience, it can be hard to sort of, or easy rather, to lose track of those types of things.
Yeah, I think it's important that everybody on the team understands, like, if you could show it to them either on Zoom or walk it to somebody and say, here's what it looks like. It's going to always be at this spot in the house. It's very helpful for everyone to know.
Okay, and then I just wanted to come back to something that you said, and I think we moved off quick, but one of the more important parts is medication list, right? Something I was forever afraid of was, you know, reaction from medications for my mom. She was on so many. Do you have any ideas, like, what's the best way to do that? You know, is it literally just type it out, you know, medication, dose, when it's taken, and purpose? Like, how would you do that if you were in that situation?
Yeah, I think the purpose is important too, because sometimes it's not always, it's prescribed for different reasons, the same medication. So that's a really big one that people forget. I think it's important that you're putting down, this is the current medications, because they could change often. And I know that there have been past conversations here that you've had pharmacists on and talked about really great tips about how to label the bottles if the dosage changes, and where to keep medications. But as far as the list, I think it's important to have the list, have it dated, and then the purpose of that medication.
Love it. Thank you. Really valuable piece of information from a listener here. And this person says, I personally learned that DNR must be on yellow paper only. So if you're making copies, make copies on yellow paper. Wow, time really sure does fly on these sessions with you, Sheila. We're at the 28. Any well, actually, before I ask you for some final thoughts on emergency plans, I am just going to put a plug in for next month's session. It'll be on the 18th, the 18th of April at 12 noon regular time, and we're talking about a caregiver's guide to palliative care. So another topic that I'm personally really excited about. I'm just going to put the link to registration in the chat there. Okay, I wanted to do that in case we lost some people who had to hop before the 12:30. So 12:29, Sheila, what we've covered a lot of ground here. The importance of emergency plans, the fact, most importantly, I think my main takeaway is it does not have to be all done at once, which would have been a huge relief for me, for my previous caregiving self. We talked a bunch about sort of some ideas on how to approach it and what to go in it. How would you sort of put a bow on this for people? Like, what would your final thoughts be for anybody listening who might be saying, all right, it's time for me to take a step forward on getting my own plan in place?
Well, I think what you touched on is it's not a race. Slow down. This is a process. Think about that author who's writing a book. They're not going to write the whole book. They don't know what the chapters look like. They haven't figured out the number of chapters. They're just jotting down ideas. Think about it as jotting down ideas. It sounds so much easier, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So you're gathering ideas over time. You're talking to other people about it. Put them in one place. You can organize them later, but at least put them in one place. And then, just give yourself a little grace. It's going to change. It's gonna morph over time, and just do the best you can. And we're here to add more conversations like this. So
I think I really appreciate that, Sheila, and glad you mentioned this notion of the fact that they are going to change over time, and so along with the fact that it all doesn't have to be done at once, the idea that these are sort of living and breathing things, collections of things, documents. Like I think I would have personally found that helpful, just from a mindset shift, right? It's not creating an emergency plan isn't something you do, set it and then forget it. It's sort of constantly evolving. Couple other questions. Glad to see people are excited about are looking forward to next week or next month's session on palliative care. Request, Sheila, I think this is because you're our guest again, but for longer sessions, for 45-minute sessions instead of 30. So that's something we should probably think about. We've gotten that request before.
sure.
But
we covered a lot today.
Yeah. And on that note, if there's other questions that you have, thoughts you'd like to share, please do reply to your registration email. I get those emails. I will respond. And we really appreciate you being here. I think that's it, Sheila. Thank you as always.
You are so welcome.
Thanks, everyone. Take care. Have a great day.
Take
Bye now.
care.